Hello, everybody. I am Anuradha ma'am, and I will be taking up the first unit from your English text. Before we begin, let me give you a quick preview about the book that we are going to follow. Honeydew. Yes, you heard me. Honeydew is the name of the book wherein we have 10 chapters and 6 poems in all. Today, we begin with our first chapter, that is The Best Christmas Present in the World by Michael Morpurgo. A quick summary. It is a story of a man who is in the British Army. His name is Jim Mafferson. His wife Connie, Mrs. Jim Mafferson. His friend Hans Wolf from the opposite German army, and the speaker who finds a letter written by Jim to his wife Connie expressing a wonderful event that took place between the two opposite armies on a Christmas morning. So, let us begin. It was the Christmas Eve, during which our speaker, who did not have a very luxurious life, spotted an old broken piece of furniture, a roll-top desk in a junk shop, which was going for very little money, means it was going for a very cheap price. He desperately needed one, and so he bought it. He had to fix it before actually using it. So he started working on it in his garage. He noticed how fire and water both had damaged the desk. He tried to open the last drawer, which was stuck fast, means tightly shut. Somehow, after applying all his power, he opened it, and to his surprise, there was a black box in that secret drawer. Something was written in a shaky handwriting over the box. He knew it was wrong to open or read somebody's message, but his curiosity took over and he read the lines written over the box. Inside it was an envelope addressed to some Mrs. Jim Mafferson. A British soldier named Jim Mafferson had written this particular letter to his beloved and dearest wife, Connie. In the letter, he had described about a wonderful and heartwarming incident that took place on the no man's land between the German and British army men. No man's land is the patch of land between the two countries divided by a border where entry or exit of any human being is strictly prohibited. Okay? No man's land is the piece of land where entry of any human being is strictly prohibited. This is in regards to the protection of the nation on either sides. In the letter, he says, "It was a Christmas morning when the Fritz cheerfully and happily wished the Tommies a Merry Christmas. The Tommies also wished the Fritz a Merry Christmas with the same emotion. But this did not stop here. The Fritz made another move towards the enemy line, unlike enemies. Fritz here means the German soldiers and Tommies means the British soldiers. Okay? Fritz and Tommies, these are names given to the particular soldiers. The German soldiers were called Fritz and British soldiers were called Tommies. On understanding what the Germans actually wanted, the British soldiers also put a foot forward and joined the fun and celebration. None of the officers wanted to stop this gathering because they all longed for this war to end and longed for peace and longed to return home. It is an ardent wish of every soldier that the war gets over soon and he meets his family. He sees his family members. And so was the feeling of the soldiers on either sides, the Germans and the Britishers. Both the soldiers wanted to go home, wanted the terrible and horrible war to finish. That day, they completely forgot all the barriers and enjoyed the togetherness. The grey coats of German soldiers and khaki coats of British soldiers were all one in the middle of the no man's land. Jim tells Connie about this German officer whose name was Hans Wolf. Jim says he was from Dusseldorf and played cello in the orchestra. Jim also tells Connie how he introduced himself to Hans Wolf as a school teacher from Dorset. He overwhelmingly continued telling Connie how and what all they talked about. The rum, the sausages that they shared. They also shared their school life, their other interests, and families. Everybody was making most of this moment that they had. They were laughing, talking, eating, etc. Jim also shared the Christmas cake made by Connie with Hans Wolf. And Hans couldn't stop appreciating the cake made by Connie. Most of all, Hans loved the marzipan over the cake. What is marzipan? It is a sweet covering on the cake made from sugar, eggs, and almonds. Later, the whole culmination turned into a football match. A match between Fritz, that is, the German soldiers, and Tommies, that is, the British soldiers. It was a wonderful match. Jim and Hans were sitting there as mere spectators. They were spectators of this miraculous day, of this wondrous event. They cheered, clapped, and stomped their feet in enthusiasm and excitement. Hans then made a statement that even you and me will agree with. He said, "This is how we all should solve a fight. This is how we all should resolve a war, by playing a football match." The reason behind this, according to him, was no one dies in a football match. No children become orphans. and no wives become widows. Unlike in the war using ammunition, people die, the soldiers die, leaving their families helpless, leaving their children orphans, leaving their wives as widows. But if the war is resolved by a football match, nobody will suffer. And the one who wins the match will be the winner of the ultimate fight. This was the point of view of Hans Wolff. Don't you agree to this? That's a great idea, right? Fritz won the football match by 2-1. The time had now come to go back to different lands and different trenches and do the duty. The rum, the sausages were all over. All the soldiers wished each other and hoped for this war to get over soon. Hans Wolff shook hands with Jim and confessed that he will never forget this day and walked away unwillingly and slowly. The reason he walked away unwillingly was he did not feel like leaving the scene. He did not feel like walking away from such a good environment. Later that night, soldiers on both the sides sang Christmas carols aloud. They all had had a cherishable and memorable day. Jim ended his letter by saying everyone wanted this war to finish and go back home. We are in the third part of the story. Now, the speaker or the buyer of the roll-top desk, you remember? He read this letter and kept it back into the envelope safely. Next morning, he drove straight to the address and tried looking for Mrs. Mafferson, or Connie, as she was called by Jim Mafferson, her husband. He found out that her house had burned to ashes. On inquiring about her, he found out that Connie was in the house when the house had caught fire. The reason of this mishap, according to the neighbors, was the candles she lit in place of using electricity. She thought electricity was too expensive. The neighbors told that she was now in a nursing home in Burlington House. The speaker, on hearing this, rushed to the Burlington House nursing home. He saw that the nursing home was decorated with paper chains and a Christmas tree kept in a corner. He told them that he was a friend of Mrs. Mafferson and had come to wish her a Merry Christmas, and give a present to her. The matron took the speaker into a conservatory where Connie was. She was not celebrating like the others. Rather, she was sad and confused. She had no family other than Jim. The speaker saw that she was sitting in a wheelchair, lost and sad. When the speaker said, "Hello," she looked and kept looking at him vacantly. The speaker showed her the box, the envelope, and told how he had found it. But Connie kept looking at him. She wasn't listening to him at all, nor was she speaking. She mistook the speaker for Jim. And with tears in her eyes, she said, "This is the best Christmas present in the world." She requested the speaker, who she thought was Jim, to read the letter for her. She told him how much she missed his voice. Now that Jim was back, she could hear him and give him the cake with the marzipan around it, as Jim loved the cake and marzipan made by Connie. So, this is the lesson about Jim Maferson, his wife Connie, and the wonderful incident that happened between the German and British soldiers. Here are the new words that we came across while we read the lesson. Spotted means found. Scotch marks are the burn marks. Restore means to repair a thing. Veneer, a thin layer of plastic or decorative wood on furniture of cheap wood. Taken their toll on means damaged. Stuck fast, as I told you, means shut tight. Scruples, feeling that makes you hesitant to do something wrong, which tells you from within that what you're doing is wrong. Trenches, long, deep ditches in the ground where soldiers hide from the enemies. I'm sure you must have seen trenches in many patriotic and movies which are, army and defense based. Fritz are the German soldiers, I told you. Tommies are the British soldiers. Schnapps, this is a German drink made from grains. The German soldiers were sharing schnapps with the British soldiers, and British soldiers were sharing their sausages with the German soldiers. Marzipan, I told you, a sweet covering on a cake made from sugar, eggs, and almonds. Muddled headed, confused, the manner in which Connie was sitting in the wheelchair, muddled headed. Lit up, excited, when she saw the speaker coming to her and talking to her, her face lit up with excitement. This is again a little more explanation about the lesson, the gist of the lesson. The speaker found a roll-top desk in a junk shop. These points need to be clear with you. He found a black box and an envelope in one of its drawers. On reading it, he understood that it was for Mrs. Jim Maferson, that is Connie, from her husband Jim Maferson, who was a British soldier. In his letter, Jim had described a wonderful incident that happened between the two opponent armies, the Germans and the Britishers. Okay? Moving ahead, on a cold and frosty Christmas morning, how the two armies forgot all their barriers and differences and enmity and played, ate, drank, sang, and enjoyed. According to him, it was the best Christmas ever, according to Jim, who was writing the letter. He also told his wife how and what both the armies felt and longed for. Remember, they longed for the war to get over. Jim met a German officer named Hans Wolf and exchanged words with him while they were spectating or enjoying the football match. They talked about work, family, interests, and everything. Jim shared the cake and Hans shared his rum with each other. It was a memorable experience for both of them, and they said they would never forget it. The gathering, the coming together of both the armies, then turned into a football ground and they started playing a football match. Hans thoughtfully said, "If the war could be resolved by a football match, no one would die, no children would become orphans, and no wives would become widows." You have to remember this point, okay? What was Hans's thoughts about resolving a war by a football match? The Fritz won the match, and it was gradually time to go back behind their respective trenches and become enemies again. But they sang Christmas carols throughout the night and fell asleep. Now, the speaker thought that this letter is very special and it should reach the person for whom it is written. Who is it written for? Connie, yes. He found out where Connie was and at the moment and went to her. On seeing the speaker, Connie thought it was Jim, who had returned from the war, and she started crying. She told the speaker, mistaking him for Jim, that his coming back is the best Christmas present in the world for her. The speaker, on the other hand, did not disappoint her by saying that he wasn't Jim, but gave her the present. That's all.